Today's video is about Jamrud railway station. Of great game fame, fought between the superpowers occupying India, the British Raj, versus the Russian Empire of Tsars. The great game Jamrud railway station is near the Jamrud Fort. 1837, the site of Battle of Peshawar, ending the Sikh Empire of Punjabis who had captured Peshawar in 84, just 3 years before. Punjabi Sikhs under Ranjit Singh had come to play the great game on the instruction of British Raj. After the 1801 Amritsar agreement with the British to fight the Pashtuns only, Sikh army was armed, trained, funded and managed by European army officers like Colonel Paulo Evitable, who was installed as governor of Peshawar later. Even British Raj officially took over India in 1857. Afghans had been ruling the Indian subcontinent from Afghanistan to Arabian Sea in Calcutta, connected by the GT road made by the Pashtun Indian king Sher Shah Suri Yusafzai in 1580, which passes under the Khyber Pass, and it's a 3,000-kilometer road serving as mean of communication from Kabul to Indian Ocean, cutting through the Hindu Kush mountain as the Khyber Pass. Jamrud railway station lies north of Karachi port on the railway track extending from Karachi to Jamrud, Peshawar, about 1800 kilometers long. The track was completed in 1898 to this place, 5 years after the Durand Line Agreement, which cut off Afghanistan from the Indian subcontinent in 1893. Afghanistan kept its reputation as the graveyard of empires, starting from a long list: the Huns of Central Asia, the Macedonian Alexander the Great Army, the Greeks, the Mongol Genghis Khan's army, the Punjabi Sikhs of India, and the British Raj, the Russians, and the Americans recently. This was the last station from the Karachi port, and this station was completed in the year 1898 with the broad gauge railway track coming from Karachi to Peshawar Valley, and this was the last station in the Peshawar Valley. The British had planned to go ahead with further expansion with the narrow gauge line. They thought that the broad gauge line would not be possible from here in the mountains of the Khyber Pass, because the Khyber Pass was inside the Hindu Kush mountains, and they thought it was difficult to get the broad gauge track over there. So they were thinking of two options. One was to build a Kabul River Railway. The Kabul River Railway would be from here to the Mulagori hills towards the Varsak area, and that will go to the Shalman area. So when it reaches the Shalman area, because the Shalman Valley is in the Khyber district of the Pakhtunkhwa region, so from that they would have gone to the Momand area. So they were thinking on this option as the first option, and the second option was to have a narrow gauge railway going through the Khyber Pass along the road, because the Jamrud railway station lies right next to the GT road, the Grand Trunk road, or the Sher Shah Suri Yusafzai road, and it continues with this road until Lahore. So they wanted to continue to the Khyber Pass, but later on there was some other service done which was proving the point that a broad gauge railway line could be extended to the border area of the Durand line, which is called the Khurrum border, because Khurrum is sort of the last station over there. After Khurrum comes the Landikhana station. So Landikhana station is right on the Durand line border, and it's just a kilometer from there. And from Landikhana, the railway line would later be extended to the border. This beautiful railway station could serve as a means of transport for Peshawar, but unfortunately it is not being used. And why it is not being used, I will just tell you. And right now a circular railway station, a circular railway could be planned, which could take the people from here to Sadr and Kent area as it passes through Hayatabad, Peshawar, the Bada Gate, Nothia, and then towards the Kent area. So if a local train is planned on this, it could serve dual purpose as a transport as well as for the tourists, because if the tourists come to this Jamrud fort, which has got historical value and it is turned into a museum, then it could serve the people of Peshawar and generate revenue, because the railway station is right next to the Jamrud fort. The most important and the unique thing about this Jamrud railway station is this, that it passes through a runway. That's right, it passes through the Peshawar airport runway, and the Peshawar airport was made in 1927, and the railway line passes through the runway. So it's the only train in the world where you have to take the permission from the aircraft tower for the train to pass through the runway. And there had accidents. The Pakistan Air Force aircraft was once hit by a railway engine, steam railway engine, while it was standing on this runway, which is an interesting thing which happens a couple of years ago. So as you can see on this satellite picture, that the runway has the railway tracks passing through it, and yes, of course, the plane land on this runway while landing on top of the railway tracks. So both the Peshawar airport and the Jamrud station are both unique in the world. While coming from Peshawar Kent station, the railway steam engine driver has to follow a particular protocol, because it's not equipped with modern communication equipment. So while it has to come through, it follows a particular protocol. And since this Peshawar airport has not been upgraded, it's the same airport that was built in 1927. So the protocol is like this, that after coming from the Peshawar Kent and Sadr center, it comes to Nothia and then to Bada Gate, and after this it comes down to the airport and it slows down, comes to a full stop near the 9,000 feet long runway of the Peshawar International Airport. Then the train waits from the clearance from the airport control tower called ATC, and either a telephone is used or somebody goes there physically to talk to the ATC person, and then maybe have a cup of tea with him, and then they come back and inform about the clearance, and then the train is cleared by the ATC to go through the runway. After the train passes through the runway, then it goes towards a place called Kachagadi, and then from Kachagadi it goes to Hayatabad town. So and when after it passes the Hayatabad town, then it reaches the Jamrud railway station, and the Jamrud railway station can still be used even now. But after the Jamrud station, the railway track has has been damaged because of the torrential rains. Because of the climate change, there has been a lot of rains in the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa area. Because of the rains, one of the bridge has collapsed, which I will tell you about it. The train has a very interesting engineering aspect. The picture shows the catch sidings, and this is used to stop a runaway train. Like, for example, if the train is coming from the hilly area to the down place and it is coming very fast and the brakes are heated up or not working, that the catch sidings are used to stop the runaway train as it goes up the steep slope, and hence it stops rolling, and then accident is prevented. And apart from the catch siding, as you can see the special pattern of the railway track, this is used for reversing the railway. Like, if the train engine is coming, there are two engines, one at the front and one at the back, so you can reverse the train. So the front engine will become the back engine, and the back engine will become the front engine. So this is pretty interesting. Like, such catch sidings and reversing stations, about total 4 in number, 2 at the Jamrud side and 2 in the Khurrum and the Landikhana side. There are actually 2 catch sidings where the train goes and it reverses. So this is a very cool feature of this beautiful runway. And furthermore, that the journey on this train is picturesque, because you go through the mountains of the Khyber Pass, and it has a gradient of 3%. Like, the train, if you consider Peshawar or Jamrud as 0, then the Khurrum and the railway, which is the highest in these Khyber Pass mountains in the Hindu Kush range, is about 2,000 feet, and the total length is about 34 kilometers from Jamrud to Khurrum. So the train rises about 2,000 feet, and then when it reaches Khurrum and when it goes towards the Durand line border at the Landikhana, there's a drop of about 872 feet. Like, it loses 872 feet from the 2,000 feet. Like half of that gradient is lost in just short while. So the gradient is then 1 in 25, and there are about 34 tunnels. So if you join these tunnels in that 34 kilometers, so with every kilometer there is 1 tunnel. So there's 34 tunnels in that 34 kilometer length. Means that if you join together, so the aggregate length is about 4 kilometers, which is pretty interesting. And the first train was actually driven by a lady who was the Mrs. Victor Bailey, who was the wife of the engineer who built it. And the project was actually given to Colonel Huron Gordon. So Colonel Huron Gordon, British Army engineers, was the one who was in charge of this project, and he built it in record 5 years time from Jamrud railway station to Khurrum. And the total cost per kilometer was 485,000 per kilometer, almost 500,000 rupee per kilometer in 1926. So that's hell lot of money. It would be in millions currently. So the attraction of this engineering marvel is that it's old, it's in working condition, and it is an engineering feat. The Khyber Pass is dry, barren hills, nothing much to see apart from the dry, barren hills. And the other importance is historical, like the Great Game. Like, this was built by the superpowers at great cost to play the Great Game, because there was a military importance attached to it, and the two great empires were about to meet and compete in Afghanistan. And this situation has not changed. Even the current superpowers are actually fighting on same Afghanistan. So at the classic great game, it was the British Empire versus the Russian Empire, and now it is the American Empire versus the Russian Empire. So only one competitor has changed in the superpowers. So, and this is, as I said, is the only runway in the world where the clearance from the aircraft tower is needed. Now currently the importance has arisen because of the new entrance in the great game, which is China, and they want the CPEC, Chinese Pakistan Economic Corridor, and the trains serve as a trade enhancing tool because it's a cheap means of transport as compared to trucks. So China needs this to connect to Afghanistan and from Afghanistan to Russia, because the Russia has a good railway network. In 2008, there was big torrential rains because of climate change, and two bridges were swept away in the adjacent Khyber district of Pakhtunkhwa province, and this totally stopped the train to go from Jamrud railway station to the Khurrum railway station, and people lost a great opportunity to travel on this marvel of the World War I era. And the last time the train went over these bridges was in year 2006, and at that time regular train service was discontinued because the discontinuation happened in 1982. The last time before in 1982 there was bi-weekly, twice a week railway passenger trains going to Khurrum, which was used by local population, but after 1982 it was never used for passenger or cargo services, although Pakistan has the biggest trade with Afghanistan, and Afghanistan has no seaport, so it depends entirely on the Pakistani port of Karachi, and this train could have served as a best means, but it's a mystery and it's a surprise why this train service was never used by Pakistan for cargo services, although the primary purpose of this train was to take cargo from Peshawar towards the Khurrum border, because it would serve for military and heavy arms and ammunitions. So the trains which use this service are the steam trains. There are 3 steam trains. The serial number is 280HG/S serial 2216, which is the oldest. It was made in 1916 in Leeds, United Kingdom, and the other was serial number 2277 and 2306, built by the Vulcan Foundry in the year 1923. So they are now possessed by the Pakistan Railways in Peshawar, and sometimes they are used in chartered stream safaris, although the current steam safari is not the same one. It does not go to Khurrum or the border, it goes in the opposite direction towards the Punjab province border to the Attock, and although it's called the Khyber Stream Safari on the name of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province, but it's actually not the same, it's actually the opposite one, and it will take you to Attock Khurd railway station. So as you can see, now we will discuss the history of the great game which was played between the superpowers, and this railway station had strategic importance because it was to be used by the British Army, and the primary purpose was to occupy the Afghanistan. Both Russia and the British wanted to occupy Afghanistan. So the chronology of the event starts in 1834 when Peshawar falls into hand. Before that, there were 12 provinces under the Mughals till 1857, and Afghania was from Afghanistan, Kabul to Delhi. So this whole Pakistan country was part of Afghania province, and in 1834 it fell into the hand of the Sikhs under Ranjit Singh. But after 3 years, in 1837, in the Battle of Peshawar, fought in Jamrud, Shaukat and Peshawar, Bala Hisar forts were won by the local Pashtuns. But sadly, in 1839, the British came and they started to fight the locals in the first Anglo-Afghan war. But it was the onslaught of Sikhs and British together that resulted in this situation. So in 1857, the chairman of British Railway decided to make this train service. So a couple of surveys were conducted by Captain R.L. MacDonald, and since the Durand line had demarcated, one more service conducted by later on, and a broad gauge, since the broad gauge had been completed till Jamrud, then they started a work on a narrow Kabul River railway line from Jamrud to Mulagori Hills in 1905, but it was stopped after 2 years because because in 1907 there was an agreement between Russia and the Britain that they wanted nothing to do with Afghanistan, and the British was satisfied. But so the equipment that was put then was slowly was removed from the Shilman Valley and also the Mulagori Hills, and the same narrow gauge railway line, which was started in 1905. It was ended in 1909, and everything, all the bridges and culverts were taken away, and there was no more narrow gauge railway line going to Shilman Valley, although that route is better because it goes through a bit plain area and could have reached the Momand area and then towards Afghanistan. So it all changed in 1919, just after the World War I, when Afghan Durrani King Amanullah Khan Ghazi realized the importance of the lost area of Peshawar and the Pakistan area, which he had lost to the Sikhs and British. So he attacked Peshawar, and the Third Anglo-Afghan War took place. Although that was not a military success for Afghanistan, but the British realized that even if Russia is not invading, they have a threat from Afghanistan. And there was a civil disobedience movement and Quit India movement happening in India, where there was an Indian National Army of freedom fighters fighting the British, and they wanted the British to get out of the Indian subcontinent. And all these people had bases in Afghanistan. So they thought again to start building the railway line. And since most of the manpower of the British Army were either Punjabis or Bengalis who were loyal to the British, but the British felt that they could have a problem from Afghanistan and also from inside of India. So they started to build the broad gauge railway again, and the war of global domination again started, although the World War I had finished. So the great game, importance of great game, as well as to subdue the Afghanistan. They had installed a puppet ruler, Islamist fanatic by name of Bacha Sakka, on the throne of Afghanistan. So in the year 1919, British immediately assigned Colonel Gordon Heron, and he started a new survey, and he recommended a broad gauge railway line. So in 1920, the construction was started from right here from Jamrud railway station right until Lindikotal. and millions of cubic meter of material were removed, and in 5 years record time, in September 1925, they completed the broad gauge railway line up to Khurrum and beyond Khurrum to Landi Khana. So that was September 1925, and the first inauguration was done by Mrs. Sahib, who was the daughter of the engineer Victor Bailey. Victor Bailey did not attend the final ceremony in November 1925 because of bad health, and some say he had died, and some say he was or he was sick only, or maybe he went to England, but they used his wife, and there are two theories why he used his wife, because the locals respected the woman and they were expecting an attack, so maybe he used. So the first train was driven by his wife, Mrs. Victor Bailey. So that explains the respect of women by the local tribesmen. So it was December 15, 1932 that the Afghan government had requested that they don't use the Landi Khana railway station and the railway track beyond it to Khurrum. So the British government accepted that. Although in 1926 they had built up to the border, then the things remained the same for next couple of years. Then in 1947 the partition of India and Pakistan happened, and the British left India on 15th August 1947, but the Pakistan government started a regular bi-weekly railway station, but they never used it for trade because maybe they continued with sanctions on Afghanistan, because they did not want any trade with Afghanistan and they wanted to pressurize them, so they never used this train for such purpose. They continued with the bi-weekly service up to Khurrum for passengers only, and that stopped in 1982, because in 1982 Pakistan was sending guerrillas to Afghanistan to fight the Russians, mostly from refugees who had come here, and because of this situation they never used the trains, they used the trucks and the road for transporting the materials and weapons and everything. So this train was never really used, and in the war in Afghanistan finished in 1990. So in 1990 the war of proxies was finished, so a tourist train called Khyber Team Safari was started from Peshawar on charter, but this continued right up to 2006, the last train, and that was also discontinued after 2006, after the torrential rain destroyed the bridges, as I showed you before. These are the heights of the different stations in serial order, like Jamrud, Bigyari, Madanak, Chagai, Shagai, etc. So these are the references from where I took the history of this great game train project, and I hope you enjoyed my video, and I hope you subscribe to my channel, and I thank you for watching my video. Thank you very much, and goodbye from Dr. Khurrum.